Welcome to the 2022 Maui Candidate Interviews. Today we have Scott Adam, who's running for State Representative for District 13. Scott, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Aloha. Thank you for having me.
Scott, could you tell us a little bit about your background, your civic engagement here in Maui County, and why you feel you're qualified to run for this important office that we have?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a diverse background. I've lived many lives in one lifetime. I grew up in the beginning of my life. The first job I ever really had was as a lifeguard, and the very active water park actually. And so I had a lot of experience through the medical world. I became an EMT. I was also a child actor, worked in New York City, and then I pursued a career as a professional snowboarder and a snowboard coach. And I traveled the world representing the U.S. team, as well as many other academies through the competition world. And on top of that, I work in the music industry and not only as a musician, but also as a producer. And ran logistics on multiple tours, dealing with moving pieces and parts, and dealing with community engagement and multiple different entities in order to get that done, such as power and water and lighting, and many other utilities on festival scales, which are basically like small models of independent communities. I've seen the world in a great manner, and I've experienced a lot of different variations of things. I've traveled to many different continents and been a part of many different beautiful communities, as well as started multiple different programs, as well as a festival that served underserved populations, specifically with wellness programs. So I have a very, very diverse background, both as a program director, as a logistics coordinator and quartermaster, as producer, as assistant production manager and production manager. My background is very, very in depth. And since I've been here on Maui, I've held a lot of community programs. I was hosting a lot of and facilitating a lot of rallies with DJs, my DJ skills, as well as speaking throughout the last few years on what has been happening on this island, as well as nationally. I've been on multiple different talk shows and that have been discussing political situations that we're currently in. And I have, over the past 6 months, been deeply involved in the current political campaigns with multiple different gubernatorial, lieutenant governor, and U.S. congressional candidate.
So along that, in terms of, you certainly have a diverse background that you're bringing to our county. And I guess the application of that in terms of civic engagement, you mentioned that you've been involved with rallies and a DJ and participating in those rallies. First of all, what were those rallies? And second, have you been involved in testifying in any of the charter commissions or any of the other commissions that we have, the 33 different ones, and the county council? Have you been involved with those types of testimonies also? So you could tell us a little bit about what you've been involved in terms of activism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So during this whole situation, I've been standing up and speaking out with the current overreach of the government and the way that the rights of the people have been taken away. I have attended county council. I've sat on a few sessions, and I have submitted testimony on Oahu, both on the Board of Education, as well as a few other state level testimonies. Specifically having to do with the current mandates and lockdowns, which I am adamantly opposed against. And throughout the last 2 years, as I said, with the rallies, I was specifically out on the streets encouraging people to speak out, stand up for their rights, share the information that they know, and not let these the tyrannical politicians dictate illegal mandates upon the people.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Next, we'll have Lucianne Dene who will ask questions.
Mahalo. Hi, Scott. Nice to see
Hi.
you again.
Nice to see you as well.
So I have a couple simple questions. How long have you lived in District 13? And what do you think are the key issues in this district that you, if you were in the legislature, would like to propose either funding or legislation to address? In other words, what do you hope to accomplish for this district?
Well, I've actually lived in District 13 for about 3 years. I know it's not a long time, but things aren't working. And I know that the current level of people in office are not serving the people, and they are serving self-serving in a lot of ways. What I do know is that we have my district specifically is involved with 2 islands that that get affected by the decisions that are made for Maui County. That's good for Maui County, but not good for Molokai or Lanai or Hana for that. As a matter of fact, I know that we have an island, Molokai, that to get any sort of special treatment, to get any sort of even veterinary care for your animals, or you have to fly to Oahu or fly to Maui. I know that there is a ridiculous amount of attention given to speed bumps and other traffic issues in the Haiku area, but not actually ever given to the economic development through Molokai or Lanai, or the support of the unemployment that's happening in the levels of unemployment and the continual level of unemployment that continues to happen because there's a cycle of dependence that gets created because there's no incentives, I guess, or education to help small businesses continue to grow and to create an export economic system.
So those are the main issues, that there's kind of not a lot of thought put into economic opportunities, and that it's possible that the smaller rural communities don't get their fair share. Is that what you're saying? I mean,
Absolutely.
We do have a current rep who lives in the Hana district. So are you saying that she ignores her own district?
I'm saying that the issues that are being well, I can't say ignores the district, but what I can say is that the current issues might not be really being addressed in the best manner.
So you've gone over the budget reports on what funding has been proposed and obtained for projects in the district. They're not speed bumps because the state doesn't put in speed bumps very often. I will tell you that. The raised table by Haiku School was a state project because it's on the highway, but it was requested by parents for years for safe routes to school. So it wasn't someone sitting at a desk who decided that we ought to do this. And just, you haven't lived here very long, so you can't be expected to know that. But so you're saying that if you got in there, you would really work on the economic opportunity side of things, and making sure that the rural communities, their needs get better met. Is that kind of your
Absolutely.
platform?
And I would call for complete audits to know exactly where these monies are going, these dollars are going. I think that there is a lack of transparency from what I've experienced and what I've witnessed on who's making these deals with who and how they're going forward. And so realistically, what I would love to have is more transparency, an open and transparent system where there's more community engagement, there's more town halls, and there's actually more representation of the people in government and bringing the power back to the people, because the level of actual community engagement right now that I'm seeing, it seems like a very small group that continues to be involved, and we need to figure out a way to get each individual community involved in the decisions that are important for them, because each one, as we're someone I think mentioned earlier, or maybe it was just in the discussion I had earlier, is the major diversity between, especially in District 13. They're each area is completely different and has completely different issues that are affecting it, and blanket decisions continue from what I've the discussions that I've had with some people who are very concerned. Blanket decisions don't seem to cover the actual the concerns of all the people in the districts.
Thank you. I'm going to pass you on to Bruce.
Grace, Bruce Douglas next.
Hello, Scott.
Hey, Bruce. Aloha.
Hold on, I have to fix something here. So for me, the sign of a real statesman is not just what they vote on, but what they champion in the legislature, what they take from beginning to end, propose and get voted on. If you were elected to State House, what would be your 3 favorite projects that you would want to champion in the State House?
Well, I think, I mean, for me, like it says in my campaign slogan, integrity first. And we need to hold this government to an integrous standard. First of all, we need to get to the bottom of the election situations here in Hawaii. I first met with Seth Keshel just this weekend, and he has documented 150,000 fraudulent votes just from the 2020 election. The department, I'm sorry, what is it? The National Institute of Cybersecurity just came out on Friday and said that the voting systems are the most susceptible issue for corruption and manipulation of any machines in the world. And that is if you can actually vote in person, and all the counting machines are fully hackable and corruptible. And so we need to get down to the bottom of that, and we need to look at the integrity of election. So that's one of the things that I would champion right away, by voting and putting forth the legislation to clear voter rolls and get down to the bottom of how these elections are being manipulated. The other thing that I would champion immediately is I would call for a complete audit of all elected officials as well as their family members, so we know where the payoffs are going to and who's receiving them, and how it's getting back to each individual candidate or each individual politician who's sitting in the seats. The history of fraud, the history of corruption runs really deep, and that's really what I'd be championing, and that's what I would be going after. And from there, sustainability with our food systems, and getting to a place that maybe we can restructure the Jones Act and lower the cost of housing, and get to a place where Hawaii, as a whole, can have an export financial system where we're not depending on tourism, because we have a rich, fertile soil. We have a rich, fertile economy here, and it's a shame that the biggest, because the people are leaving faster than any sort of product we could ever create. And that's a disaster that breaks my heart, and it's something that I would champion from the get-go.
Thank you. And a follow-up question on that is, currently our voting in Maui is counted by a contractor hired by the state, who behind closed doors runs runs the cards, and then that information is sent over the internet to Oahu, who then sends it back to us by internet to say who voted. What would you do to improve that system?
Well, I think we need to get rid of complete electronic voting, period. And we need to get rid of mail-in ballot, period. We need to go back to one vote, one person, in-person voting. This blanket mail-in voting is like even I think it was Carter that actually said just a few years ago in an election investigation that the easiest way to create mass fraud is through mail-in voting. And that is for us to turn over our entire voting system to mail-in voting. I actually lived in a house, which you're familiar with, Bruce, during the 2020 election, and the stack of ballots that we received alone from the people who hadn't lived in that house in quite a while, and multiple ballots with multiple names on it that were mailed out and received. It's right for fraud. There's no real way to, and right there it validates an election. And without an election, we no longer have a constitutional republic. And without a constitutional republic, there is no structure, there's no freedom, and we might as well, kind of kiss any sort of freedoms goodbye, because we're moving into a globalist controlled state at that point.
Thank you for the excellent answers.
Pleasure.
Next, we'll have Alan Lloyd.
Hey, Scott, nice to meet you.
Nice
Aloha.
to meet you. Aloha.
So I have 2 questions and maybe 3, we'll see. So my first one is, what do you think the legal minimum wage should be in 2022?
Well, that's a dangerous question, because I mean, I know there's a constant push to go to $18, and where I think, or maybe we just did. The only thing that occurs when you raise the minimum wage is the level of taxes collected get increased. We don't raising the minimum wage is not the answer. Because it just continues to raise the cost on goods, and we're already seeing a level of inflation from our current level of national government that has driven the price of living through the roof. We raised the level of minimum wage, and we're going to drive up the cost of goods. We're going to destroy local businesses. It's not about raising the minimum wage. That's like putting the cart before the horse. It's about lowering the cost of living. It's about getting government taxation to a minimum. It's about getting smaller overall overall institutions of government, and bringing that cost of living down. There's absolutely no reason that we should be paying almost $8 a gallon in Hana for gas right now, and the price of food is going up. I was in Molokai just yesterday in Friendly's Grocery, and there was almost $9 a can for a jar of mayonnaise. The minimum wage is like putting a Band-Aid on a critical gunshot wound.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And I just have a follow-up question. And just a heads up, whenever you move your hands, we can't hear what you say. So that's just a quick.
When I move my hands, you can't hear what I say?
Yeah, just like it blanks out.
Oh, strange.
Any movement blanks it out. Okay, my second follow-up question is, it sounds like you believe that the increase of a minimum wage, increase of a wage equates to the increase in the cost of goods and services. So research has been done to show that the period before we had 1010 minimum wage, 4 years before that, up to when we had 1010 minimum wage, the wage increased from whatever it was before 1010 to 1010. And during that time, there was very little cost increase of the goods. So then we go to between now and when it was 1010 an hour, which was 4 years ago. Okay, so between 4 years ago and now, there's been no increase in the minimum wage, but the cost of goods and services has skyrocketed, which means to me that there is no equation between the increase of a wage and the cost of goods, because goods will go up anyway. What do you think?
I don't think one has to do with the other in that situation. The current situation of the prices going up has nothing to do with the minimum wage staying the same. But I guarantee you once the minimum wage goes up to $18, local businesses, local small businesses are going to have to increase their either reduce their employment or increase their wages or their prices, and that's just economics. And I don't know where the research. We've got a lot of. If anybody has ever took a statistics class, you can make statistics prove anything you want to prove. So I don't know where that report fully came from. But what I do know is that it's a no-brainer. It's a continual thing or a continual thing. If you raise the minimum wage, if you raise the goods are going to go up, and just the same thing. If we continue to print money, the inflation is going to happen. And this is exactly what we're seeing on the national level, which is causing the complete collapse of our economy. And so right now is not the time to be putting Band-Aid on a critical wound. Now is the time to be looking for answers on how to lower the cost of living and how to get the level of tax burdens on goods as well as income off of the local residents and turn it onto the corporations that don't serve the population here and that don't serve the actual residents of living in Hawaii.
Great. Thank you. Let's go to Ann Pitcatley next.
Hi, Scott. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Or see you again. So I understand that you registered as a Republican. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I know there's many critics that say, well, Hawaii is is dominated by the Democratic Party and there needs to be more balance. But I'm interested in knowing what motivated you to run as a Republican with the Republican Party.
Well, I mean, the Republican Party that you know of is not your dad's Republican Party, and not your old Republican Party. What we're looking right now is this is a Republican Party that puts the people first. And what got me to run as a Republican is because I believe in small business. I believe in putting the small person first. I believe not giving a ton of control to large industry, to large, continuing to build large government, continuing to have institutions that can't support themselves. The overall spending that we have with the current administration and the way that we dump money into projects that go nowhere and never get finished needs to come to an end. And yes, Hawaii has been a blue state since its foundation, and I think it's time for a red wave in this island, because in these islands, just because things need to change. We can't keep going down this route. We see what happens with the current administration, leading us to $8, almost $8, going up to $10 a gallon gasoline, as well as the destruction of our food supply chain, which is happening currently, and as well as continual rise in inflation. We can't continue to see a move towards handouts that we're just printing money to cover. We need to hold some fiscal responsibility and some common sense decisions. And I believe that lies within the Republican Party, and especially the new Republican Party. I've been working closely with a bunch of amazing candidates which are running this year, which are more Republicans ever running this year than in the history of Hawaii. And we're all ready to fight for the people and to make change that is really necessary to make change to save Hawaii. Because right now it's about to be sold out to globalist big money oligarchs like a Bezos, like a Zuckerberg, like an Ellis, and or Ellison, I guess it is. And we need to make some serious moves forward and open our eyes to what's truly going on, not only globally, but locally, and take action right away, or this state is not going to be livable for any of us. It's going to be the globalist big boys, billionaires club, or the servant class, and that's really all the agenda is.
I'm having a little difficulty understanding what you mean by the old school Republicans versus the new school Republicans. Give me an example of what you mean by that.
Well, there's been a revolution within the Republican Party as itself. It's been there's been a revolution to remove the old corrupt, warmongering, money-hungry greedy Republicans from the party. And there's been a whole new wave of Republicans that are here just to serve the people and to bring the money and finances and bring the economic recovery back to the working class, back to the people who actually make this country great, and not the corporate elite that has become the Democrat Party.
Are there any examples of any other states that have accomplished these ideals that you've just described?
And what ideals specifically?
What you were saying, being a representative of the people, and
no, I had a lot of ideas. What ideas specifically?
Yeah, that have been successful in promoting Republican ideals that have a Republican-dominated state Senate or House of Rep.
I mean, there's multiple. There's many states throughout the country.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on from there. Okay. Thank you.
Let me ask the next question, Scott.
Absolutely.
So my question has to do with our state system that we have of education. Right now, we have a system where a tremendous amount of our money goes over to Oahu, and then we are left with some type of money that comes back. And then you look at our present education system, the way it functions, or the dysfunction of it. What would you do as a state rep to address this issue of a centralized Oahu, school board? And how would you look at changing the system that we have at this point in time?
Well, I spent a majority of my life in the education system as a coach, as well as a program director, through the snowboarding world, through private academies, and working with different kids in a homeschooling system. And what I see for the current education system here in Hawaii, it's fully broken. I don't think it's a secret to anybody. The entire system, in my opinion, really truly needs to be fully reconstructed. And I'm a huge believer in more small-based community education systems versus these large institutional programs such as we have now. It is absolutely appalling that we have a appointed board of education that oversees the entire state. That is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And there's no way that every board of education should have its own community engagement, should have its own individual board of education with small community engaged education system with actual community engagement with parents involved. Because as soon as we turn over to this large industrial style education system with a board of education that sits on Oahu that's appointed, you take the power away from the individual communities. You take any sort of decision making and curriculum decisions away from the actual communities where it should be. And you remove parental engagement from the education systems, which is one of the actual foundations of destroying a community and destroying a culture. So I really, there was a time, and I don't want to go back in time really, but I want to say that the quality of education when we had small school systems with small boards in different parts of the world were way more effective, and it's being proven to be way more effective. Some of the best education systems in the world, such as I believe it was Norway and Sweden. So we need to take a look at how we've turned the power over of individual communities over to that large decision-making board in Oahu.
And you would propose legislation then to make that shift for?
Absolutely, yeah. I would propose legislation, and I would come together with the other representatives and lobby the other representatives in order to move forward to actually have an elected school board and change the entire structure of the way the education system's happening in Hawaii right now, because it is not serving the children. And right now the the future that we're leaving these children and the education we're giving these children, we're continually last in the nation or second to last in the nation. And that's absolutely appalling. It's absolutely appalling. We need to have more community and parent integration and engagement within our children's education system.
Thank you for that response. Lucienne Dene will be next.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Well, Scott, on the topic of economic development, oh, by the way, this was a Republican state, solid, all the way until the 1950s. And of course, the Republicans.
And when was the founding of the state?
The state started in 1950, but they had a legislature from the 1890s.
So it was red before it was a state.
It was Republican dominated state territorial legislature and appointed governors, most of whom were Republican oriented. And if you wanted to do anything in politics here, you were a Republican because that's who the plantations supported. Anyway,
that's an interesting perspective.
It was the people coming back in the 50s who had been left out of the equation, who had fought the war, who said, "Wow, could we have something a little different?" So it's a relatively new experience. But anyway, so this is not the most Republican candidates we've ever had, but probably since statehood, it might be for sure.
There's a big difference, I think, between territorial and a state. There's a huge difference in what was happening here and how things were being legislated, for sure.
Well, yes, but for the day-to-day person, the territorial legislators had a great deal of effect on their everyday life, just like the state, legislators do today. I wanted to ask about economic opportunities through better management of our water resources, which is a state issue. And your district, of course, is at the center of the storm. The District 13. We have water wars on Molokai. We have Lanai having a private corporation controlling all the water resources on the island. Although they are kind of working things out, they're really going towards conservation a lot more. And we have East Maui, which is probably the largest public water supply in the state. That is controlled at this point with the rubber stamp of the state as a private water system. So representing this district, which depends upon water really for its economic future, what kind of policies do you think can be put into the mix? You said your number one policy is to, work on these economic issues. So water is a huge one. There's a proposal right now to have a local control of the East Maui system, but that will require investments from the county, state, and probably even others. Maybe even foundations in order to do it. So any ideas that you have, if you sit in the legislature, there's all kinds of bills about water systems every year. Most of them have a tendency to make it easier for larger water users like the corporations that have controlled water to keep that control, but not all. So what could you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing that up. Water is absolutely the bedrock and the foundation of life. And, I really, there has been a war on people in general to take the rights away from water, not only in Hawaii, but nationwide. I mean, we saw a majority of the actual water supply through California that was actually, I think, given I can't remember what the actual lease was, but they were given the rights to Pepsi Cola for a ridiculous amount of time, a large amount of their actual fresh water in a time of a drought. And, that practice of giving corporate rights to water is absolutely ridiculous and needs to be readdressed immediately. And the rights of the water should be with the people, and the decisions should be made through the communities. What happens with their water? That just comes back to my main thing that I talked about earlier, is community engagement, making decisions together as community through good policy and communication and debate. One thing that I do see with the water that is a big, it's more than just the water, but we'll talk about the water itself, is the repression of technologies. There should never be any sort of water issues. We are surrounded by water, and we have desalination that we've used for generations on U.S. military ships. There's electrostatic water nets which have been put into place, which is just continually capture water. With a climate like we have here, that water is just in abundance coming from the sky, especially on the North Shore and Haiku and in Hana. But we're surrounded by water, so having water issues is a lack of forward thinking. It's a lack of looking at what we have for technology and what we have to be able to push our communities forward with the necessary resources. So again, I think that's coming back to limited thinking and people not actually reaching out for what is possible, and having technologies repressed from us strategically in order to control water. So I would go forward with legislation as well as creative thinking on the state level to go forward to deal with these water projects and water issues. And we have many options. The problem is that people aren't thinking outside the box and sticking in the same old mentality of thinking.
I'm going to do one quick follow up because we're a smaller number of people, but I thought I heard you say that actually we should sort of limit the amount of money that goes to government, and yet it seems like you have in your plans a number of beneficial things that the government could spend money on, which would take money. So how does that work out?
Well, we need to make sure that we know, first of all, we need to not put the money to important things that are actually going to benefit our community and our society, and not to big projects like the rail that goes to nowhere on Oahu that neighbor islands are continuing to spend money on. We have a ridiculous amount of projects that continue to go forward that don't actually serve the residents of these islands. How many billion or millions of dollars have been spent on a train that we're paying for in Oahu that doesn't serve anybody, isn't never going to be completed, and has been wasted taxpayers' money and many years of planning and decision making and communication. So it's actually coming back to, again, my original thing is auditing the entire system and understanding where the waste is, where these pork spending bills are going, and bringing things to light to have actual community engagement to decide where we spend this money in a better way and how this money can serve the people. And so that's, yes, there's no doubt we need to spend money. You're not going to find success unless you spend money. But the key is having common sense decisions on where the money's spent and how it can benefit the most amount of people.
Thank you. Moving on to you, Bruce.
And Bruce will be our last questioner.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, Bruce.
One of the big issues for the people in Maui these days, and Haiku you're representing, is affordable housing. Not only affordable housing to buy, but affordable housing to rent. If you were elected, what would be your solution to the affordable housing and affordable rental problem?
Well, I have a pretty extensive plan that I've been formulating. But one of the main things that I see is the level of local homeowners that when they sell off to either larger corporations or to out-of-state residents. And we have an issue right now nationwide as well as here, as we have big corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard who are purchasing land for below asking price, or I'm sorry, way above asking price and coming in and scooping stuff up. And we're seeing that a bit, from what I understand, in Oahu, and a bit here in Hawaii. But for the main thing that I would like to see is, well, I mean, there's many things, but one of the things is incentives for local residents when they are selling their house, to sell to a local resident and having an incentive there. In addition, I think that we need to look at the building structure and the building permits scenario, like being able to open up the types of building and the innovative technologies that are out there for structural building is would help to speed up the home, basically expansions if necessary, as well as we need to look at how who we're giving building permits to. Are we giving permits to folks that are coming from the mainland that have multi-million dollars to build a second or third home? I think that needs to be adjusted and looked at. And the priority for building permits and priority for land sales need to be given to residents who have residence here on the islands. And we need to take a look at how, and that this, again, I don't know exactly the best way to go forward with this, but I know that we can get to the bottom of it, and with forward thinking, we can come up with a better plan that can create a structure that can provide housing for those who live here at a more affordable cost, and also discuss the making a more reasonable and more easily accessible use of the Hawaiian homelands, and making sure that we maybe even go through and readjust the blood quantum concept and get to more of a a percent or a bloodline concept instead of the quantum, so that we can get more specifically Hawaiian natives into their own property and their own land on Hawaiian lands. Because from what I understand and what I've done some research, it's not being made very easy, and the lands are being manipulated and even sold off. So that's something that needs to be addressed, and that would help out, especially the local residents. But there's a whole bunch of, it's such a complex answer. I have many more things, but that's just a little bit. If you have follow-ups, I can expand.
Okay, thank you for that thoughtful answer.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Scott, we've covered a lot of ground over this past 50 minutes. So is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion, or anything we might have missed that you'd like to add?
No, I stand for faith, family, and freedom. And really what I'm doing is to, fight for the next generation. And I'm just simply a servant. And I think that we need to get back to servants of the people, actually listening with two ears instead of speaking with one mouth, and being here to really spend time with the people and return the power back to the people, because with our current policies and our current criminal cartel in charge, we've been taking the power away and simply repressing the people and destroying businesses, and that can't stand any longer. And this is a hill I'm ready to die on, and I'm ready to fight as hard as I can to make the people of Hawaii as free and prosperous as possible.
Well, great. Thank you, Scott, for that commitment. And again, Scott Adam, who's running for State Representative District 13. Mahalo.
Mahalo.